One hate to marry female Queen Su 100. 14 came in late, wearing a scarlet robe, holding the other end of the scarlet silk in his hand, and was bowing towards the other end of the scarlet silk. Looking up, she could only see that her little groom, with his pear blossom ornaments weighing down half of his head, was slowly straightening up with the support of Shipur. As soon as she saw the heavy headdress, she knew that this person must be the one from Duke Mu's house. In the book, the cannon fodder King Xian is not really a responsible man. After paying homage to the court, he turned around and stayed in the fireworks alley for the night. With the help of wine and courage, he captured the white lotus that had been hidden in his heart and ruined the innocence of the good man's son in this drunken lantern riddle atmosphere. She didn't love the royal husband given by the emperor, but she was stunned by the second son of the household minister, Lu Tingyu, who had a famous husband. Lu Tingyu was a man of extraordinary talent and beauty and could be called the #1 young master in the imperial capital. If he waited a little longer, he would be able to marry his dream lover, the 11th princess, in 7 days. Although he was not a royal wife, he was still an ordinary husband and could be called a side princess. Not to mention that the person was his love. After thinking about it, it was considered complete. But it happened that King Xian stepped in and got the reputation of stealing her sister's husband. She didn't know how to force her husband, so she put aside her wedding day to do this bastard thing and unnecessarily burdened her young husband, who had just stayed alone in the vacant room. In the end, in her absurd and funny love story, the child's ending was just a white silk ribbon and a letter of divorce. She was not yet 16 at the time. The former Princess Yen, who only had a few appearances in total, had never done anything bad, and had never had an outstanding life, was now standing in front of her, with a face as red as roses, and a pair of clear eyes that were shining brightly at her on her young face, with a hidden smile at the corner of her lips. She couldn't stop smiling, and the pear blossoms didn't overwhelm the little child. Instead, she looked more and more energetic. Her clear eyes were reflecting her bright red face at that time. If she remembered correctly, the child in front of her was actually not yet 14 years old. But even though the original owner made her wish to the Lord God, she never mentioned even a little bit of what she owed the child. According to the original work, the child was forced to go on a road in white silk by the original owner only a year after she was married. When she died, she was even sent back to her parents' home with a letter of divorce. This shows that the original owner was really not a good person. Thinking of the original owner, 14, who was dressed in a bright red wedding robe, couldn't help but frown slightly. When the resentful spirit that was finally despised by everyone was captured by the main god system, he was thinking about only one thing, not revenge. On the contrary, this guy still hoped that the man who pushed her into a desperate situation could live a happy life. Her wish was very simple, to avoid him being disturbed and worried for the rest of her life. From 14's point of view, this task was the easiest one she had ever taken on. As long as King Xian no longer provokes Lu Tingyu, all the big disturbances, worries, and pains will naturally disappear. In other words, the original owner purchased the mission at the cost of her own soul. Perhaps it was because of her poor thinking that the transaction did not have much value. However, whenever 14 thinks of the soul lamp, she will resolutely do her best to complete the task. There is no other reason. She just wants to light the soul lamp earlier and let that person come to life. There are only 71 Small World book souls left to mix into lamp oil and rekindle that person's life. 14 has completed 10 Small World missions, but still can't remember whose soul lamp he is trying to light. In a world that even she has forgotten, living is just a code name, number 14, with no past, as if it has never existed. The only thing that supports her is that she remembers that she is trying to light a soul lamp and save someone. It may be absurd in the eyes of others, but this is her only belonging. 14, no. It should be said to be King Xian, holding the little princess at the other end of the big red silk, surrounded by the warangs, being driven into the bridal chamber. A group of handsome men are talking to each other, which makes people always have an inexplicable sense of disharmony. Maybe it's because this is the first time that 14 has come into contact with the small world of female supremacy. It's really hard to accept the bloody room full of people, and there are a group of posing and chirping men. Forgive her for not having enough sense of empathy. After all, as an executive agent who has just struggled out of the first 10 small worlds full of blood and killing, it is somewhat difficult to adapt to the heroine who focuses on romance. After everyone said their congratulatory words, they left in an orderly manner to keep the new house quiet. Before 14 had time to say something to the child, someone came from outside to rush him. Your Highness? Your Highness. The cautious voice seemed to be silently accusing. The original owner was not an easygoing person. He deliberately lowered his posture and said tremblingly, Your Highness, the guests outside are still waiting for His Highness to start the banquet. New. After 14 responded, Lin Men glanced back at Princess Yen, who was sitting on the wedding bed. Her eyes followed her, but she didn't know how to place her hands. She was so nervous that she opened her mouth frequently to say something, but no words came out. She suppressed the blush on her face, and her clear eyes, didn't know how to hide even basic emotions, and the expectation revealed in them was clearly visible. Maybe the child wanted her to say something, or maybe it was something else. However, in the end, she said nothing and just followed the waiter out the door and walked away. In the original work, King Xian was the most favored one. It can be said that he was extremely favored by the queen. He was given a title at the age of 1. Even after getting married and having children until the queen passed away, King Xian was always praised by the empress under her wings and in the palm of her hand. She was the only princess who was given a title but stayed in the palace for a long time. The naughty child raised under this great favor ran away after being worshipped in the last life, leaving the empress to bask in the sun, and went to the sad autumn moon, crying, and then went to do that bastard thing. In the end, the empress never really expressed her anger towards her. The favor she received could be described as lawless. To be honest, it was not surprising that such an environment created such an irresponsible princess who loves to go her own way. Speaking of which, 14 and the original owner still have one thing in common, and that is stubbornness. Once 14 has identified the mission goal and drawn up the mission route, it will not be changed unless there is a big accident. She accepts people's souls as a price and naturally chooses the best mission strategies for sale. In the face of this small world, not only must the power be overwhelming, but at least it must be able to protect itself. The second most important thing is to protect others and become a hidden backing for the mission target in disguise. Only then can the most perfect full translation be free of Lu Tingyu's disturbance and worry. King Xian followed the servant to the banquet, and when he turned around, he did not forget to tell the princess to send some food. She thought that she would not go back to the new house after leaving. After all, the mission did not require her to conquer Princess Yin. By the way, I also took advantage of the banquet where all the senior officials gathered together to get acquainted with the new environment and get to know each other while it was hot. Singing and dancing flourished, percussion music penetrated the walls, and people were busy running around in the palace to celebrate. Before they even got close to the banquet hall, through a thick palace wall, one could hear the high-pitched music. Reward the Palace is full of gold and jade for the Minister of Household Affairs and 100 blessings. Minister Lu and his family are at the table. One person was asked to sing loudly. Come forward and taste the 4 kinds of dried fruits: tiger skin peanuts, drunken concubine grapes, snow mountain plums, and oil fruits. The 4 sweet fruits: candied apples, candied longans, candied fresh peaches, and candied green plums. After passing the Lumen Gate, what came into view was the grand banquet hall. At this moment, all the courtiers who were invited to the banquet had already taken their seats with their families. Men and women each occupied a square, with women on the left and men on the right. The palace men who were busy shuttling back and forth like diligent bees were all talking, smiling and looking pretty. The family of the household minister surnamed Lu, because she pinched the spot just right, When they were seated, the movements of several people who were bending over the seats could be identified at a glance above the heads of Wu, who were sitting upright. 14's eyesight was good, and he could see clearly at a glance the young man who exuded a graceful and quiet manner in every gesture, wearing a beautiful and beautiful face. When he sat down, he didn't know if he had a natural dislike for the 14th emperor. That's why he directed a pair of spring waves towards her at the right time, catching her looking at him. The pride in his heart was unabashedly triggered, and his whole body instantly lost the beauty of Jingxian and turned into an iceberg beauty. No need to guess. She concluded that this person must be Lu Tingyu, the target of the attack. However, Prince Xian's appearance has long been changed. How can he not have this stupid look like before when he saw beauty and couldn't turn his eyes away? After just one glance, she withdrew her gaze and continued walking. She sang, "The 14th prince's envy has arrived." The empress, who was sitting high up, couldn't wait to urge her up and asked her beloved concubine to move her seat so that her daughter could sit next to her. Words of congratulations came one after another. The empress raised her hand and was about to start the main banquet when someone at the other end sang, "The 13th Prince Jingda has arrived." It turned out that in addition to her, there was also 13 who was sitting high in the middle of the banquet and bowing to the Queen Ying. This person was born on the same day as the original owner, half a moment earlier than King Xian. Her horoscopes were the same, but she was in front of her, so she became the 14th emperor. The executor happened to be also named 14th. What a coincidence. The emperor's sister is very happy today, and the emperor's brother can't help himself for a moment. He was so happy that he couldn't sleep last night. As a result, the congratulatory gift was lost again, and he went back to get it. It's so late that he came. I hope the emperor's sister won't be surprised. Farewell. Congratulations to the Queen Mother's eldest son, Prince Xian, for marrying a loving husband and a beautiful wife. I hope that Princess Xian will give birth to a precious daughter soon, so that the Queen Mother can hold her precious granddaughter soon. The Empress was overjoyed. She responded with a few words and then turned her attention to 14 beside her. 14 only heard the voice singing. As a reward, Prince Jingda, a pair of Luan and foam hairpins, and everything goes well. The 13th prince is at the table. As the swaying body entered the seat in the upper right corner, the prince who was the most favored by the empress in the palace and the emperor's brother, who had the same horoscope as the original owner, if she had not read the original work, she would really think that this was a good person to get along with. In fact, this emperor's attitude towards the original owner can be summed up in 4 words: hate him to the bone. This actor is really good at acting. His eyes and voice all show intimacy and sincerity, which is admirable. And not just the majority of those here have negative emotions towards the original owner. At a glance, there is a sea of people in the next seat, and everyone is smiling and acting well. Is this really Su Wen? She couldn't help but smile bitterly. This is originally Su Wen, but Su's premise is related to the heroine, which will lead to intermittent logical confusion between the characters under the halo of the heroine. In other words, without this halo, I can only bite the bullet and do it without any carelessness. Therefore, the meeting with the guests at the banquet on the first day of the wedding became her first step in getting to know the host's life. After the dinner, she remembered everyone present in her mind. It was not until 3 days later that she completely listed all the relationships between the characters, including comparing it with the original work, and lined up everyone present at the banquet that day in her mind, with notes. It wasn't the first time she had done something like this. It was the first time that so many people, names, characteristics, sides, etc. were crammed into her mind at once. After reviewing the last document on the table, she summoned the steward to return it. What could be submitted to the court, and what could not be all marked. Although Prince Xian was not the crown princess, she was valued much more highly by the queen than her elders. Sister, even if you are as useless as the original one, half of the people will consciously come to the King Xian's side and say that it is not the queen's order in private. I am afraid that no one will believe it, and only the original owner is ignorant and cannot see the queen's good intentions. Privately, Many memorials are submitted to her every day. Although they can only be regarded as drafts of memorials submitted informally, they are so numerous and frequent that even in the princess's palace, the officials do not dare to do so openly. Such arrogance shows how biased the queen's selfishness is. She dared to say that as long as King Xian had some ability, this selfish mother would be able to change the order for King Xian to depose the concubine, even if it was ridiculous that the concubine was both submissive and calm, and her comprehensive ability could actually fit her into the dragon chair. If he wasn't so favored, how could the original owner's single cell brain be able to struggle and become one of the villainous bosses in this book? Perhaps the plot is to take care of the heroine Mary Sue, so it makes a big move in arranging the setting of the villain boss, which will make people's heads crippled as much as possible, and it will also facilitate the display of the heroine's wisdom and courage in the future. Of course, although this is theoretically the case, Sure, who has performed many missions, knows that once the plot in the small world is broken, the characters without the constraints of the plot, especially the protagonist, will be like wild horses that are out of control. Therefore, 14 will not underestimate the abilities of the characters in Sue and Just because she mistakenly enters it. It is always basic to organize the resources she can integrate and make complete preparations. 2. To hate to marry female Queen Sue 1002. The newly submitted customer information in her hand became more and more ridiculous as she looked at it. The original owner had more than 200 guests, but the total number of available people was only 15, which was not even a fraction of the more than 200. The remaining 211 were really weird. For example, the reason for the inclusion of the 62 names was just because of the male-female looks. Among them, 3 of them were the most important and highly praised by King Xian. The reason was that those 3 people were good at flattering, and they were beautiful. Together with the 3 of her, King Xian felt that they could better support her rare femininity. To put it bluntly, it can be seen how boring the original owner was in the past. 14 couldn't understand the original owner anyway. He couldn't keep such a bunch of idle people until he was full. Even a vase had its own value. And why did these 60 people exist? No matter how masculine King Xian looks, he can't match the popularity of the peerless princess Xiaoxi in this book. What's more, Xiaoxi is the heroine of this book. I have no idea what kind of magical brain circuit the original owner has. The heroine has developed to a later stage and has a harem of 3,000 beauties, all with different comprehensive abilities, including force value, wisdom value, skill value, etc. In short, they have everything. However, her envy of the king was really weird, but later on she had hundreds of beauties as customers, and she was incapable of competing one by one. People later criticized the original owner for being a womanizer, which was a bit unfair to this naughty child. 14, who knew the plot, knew clearly that the original owner's love was single-minded. From the beginning to the end, he only focused on Lu Tingyu. Even so, he couldn't change her magical brain circuit. She did one ridiculous thing after another, without any merit. It's no wonder that Lu Tingyu despised her. At this time, she had sent the steward out. After thinking for a while, 14th casually summoned the servants from outside, intending to order them to go down and disperse the more than 200 idlers kept in Prince Xian's mansion outside the imperial city. Although she did not lack the little money to support the idlers, it was only reasonable for the superiors to make the best use of the money. Unexpectedly, the person coming from outside was her young husband, who had just married her not long ago. Today he is wearing a dark red robe with silver piping, and some rose-colored patterns are faintly visible. If you look closely, you can see that they are rose-like patterns, but the large leaves are dark in color. If you don't look carefully, you would think they are small roses. After bowing solemnly, he said softly, "I wonder if the prince will have half a day free today?" This young man's skin was like cream, his lips were red, and his teeth were white. They said he had thin lips and a cold heart, but it was his thin lips that contained a love-stretching temperament. 14 was originally frowning. After dealing with the mess left by the original owner for a few days, Xiao Mian was in a bad mood. But when he saw that the person coming was the little princess who had a ladylike demeanor and a low eyebrow, he relaxed his frown and softened his expression as much as possible. He was about to greet the little princess, but when he heard him ask this, he couldn't help but think deeply. She thought about it and realized that it had been 7 days since her wedding, except for the wedding day when she was so drunk that she passed out in the new house. She had been busy adapting to the business of being a princess, and she had indeed forgotten about her real husband. Originally, she had to have free time. Although the queen was considerate of her newlyweds and did not ask her to go to court these days, she had finally sorted out the business of the princess these days. There was still a big thing that she was eager to deal with. She originally planned to rush to the morning court today and find an excuse to go south in person. This way, she could prevent the upcoming flood incident before the heroine. At least, she could control it first, so that when the heavy rain came, the disaster would not be so serious that it would be out of control. It's not that she wants to block the heroine's path forward. In fact, 14 does this just to provide herself with insurance. She cannot allow the heroine to make too many contributions and eventually gain military power. This is a vital main line. Not long after, there will be a major flood, and the heroine will gain both fame and fortune. Not only will she make significant contributions, but she will also win the loyalty of a future general. This person has made outstanding contributions to the cannon fodder Queen and King Xian. Since she cannot be cannon fodder in advance, she, who is familiar with the plot, must save the situation. According to her idea, this trip to stop the flood disaster would in disguise cut off the heroine's plot benefits of winning people's hearts. She never intended to kill innocent people indiscriminately. In her opinion, as long as that person did not benefit from the 11th princess, the foolish loyalty would not fall on the heroine, and the goal would be achieved. Seeing that King Xian was silent for a long time, the young man's long eyelashes drooped down, covering his big, misty eyes. After a moment, he swallowed the sadness, and when he raised his eyes again, his big eyes were still shining, as if he was carefree. He knew clearly that the dull-haired man couldn't see him at this moment, but he still smiled, letting his delicate little face show his most beautiful appearance, and said softly, "Since the prince has no free time, hiding will not disturb the prince, and there is no need to order the servants to clean up the prince's clothes." But there was a hint of expectation in that tone, which even he himself didn't notice. Yes, after all, this child is young, and he thinks he hides it well. After all, others can catch more or less traces with just one look. 14 was brought back from his thoughts by this soft and waxy voice, and then he remembered something. Come back in 7 days. On the 7th day after getting married, this female Zungla man had to go back to his parents' home with his wife, and he would have to stay at home for a few days. If he went back alone, everyone would be able to tell that this married man was not favored. It is not impossible to say that the wife does not want to live with the mother-in-law. There are many people there, but inform it is more or less a walk, and drop-off and pick-up are inevitable. If he doesn't even follow the basic form, will the new husband still be laughed at in the future? 14 suddenly realized that she had remembered such a thing, but she had no time anymore. She looked at the soft little boy in front of her and bowed to her and was about to leave in disappointment. She said, "You pack up, I will stay with you for a few days." Haitang was startled. Her big eyes raised again. Her long eyelashes blinked, and then she realized. Suddenly, the clear big eyes inside were instantly dazzling, and the smile on her little face couldn't stop. Even he seemed a bit panicked when he spoke, and he stumbled in response, holding back the unbelievable joy, not forgetting his good upbringing, and bowed to her in a decent manner, and then exited behind the door. As soon as Pooh walked out of the door, he was like a kite riding in the wind. He even forgot to step on the small steps. He seemed to be walking very fast all the way, and he was just skipping to pick up the things of his wife. As for the study, not long after the little princess left, the 14th summoned the servants and explained the dismissal of the 200 guests in the palace. He also provided a number of new positions with the stroke of a pen, allowing the 200 idlers to take their own picks. If they were qualified, they could stay, and if they were not willing, they would be let go. She keeps a certain amount of money in her work, so as not to cut off the financial resources of her customers. So she provides positions for people with different abilities. Even if they are illiterate or have no skills, it doesn't matter. She has many properties in her name. Even if she is mining purely by physical strength, even if she can only act as a vase in front of the shop. In short, she can be considered as fully utilizing the properties in her name. As for whether those diners are willing to transform from rice worms to relying on their own labor ability to make a living, it is not up to her. The business model in the imperial capital is very unique. Basically, the civil and military officials of the dynasty and the royal nobles and their families can fill the entire imperial capital with a little shop. The powerless foreign businessmen only occupy the periphery. The closer you are to the inside, the more powerful and well-backed you are. Sometimes bribes do not necessarily require you to bring gifts to your door. It is not a bad idea to become a frequent customer of a certain store. The most troublesome thing for the ancients was probably this set of personal connections, right? 14 feels this deeply. The ancient people's personal relationships were really complicated. Half an hour had passed since she had just finished explaining the arrival and departure of the guests. At this time, the sky was just getting dark, and it would soon be morning time. She thought that she could only put that matter aside for the time being and sat there for 2 hours. At this time, she realized the tiredness came over her, so she stretched out her body. She was about to stretch herself comfortably, but when she looked up, she saw that the young man had also arrived. King Xian Shusher smiled at him and said hello. Here you come. Things are packed up so quickly. I'll tell you, the prince, I've already packed everything up. Unlike before, the little princess looked at her with eyes that seemed to be filled with deep affection, maybe gratitude, or maybe something else, but there was a vague intensity. Although it was just a glance that showed a good tutor, she lowered her head and stopped looking directly, but there seemed to be a fiery emotion in that glance that made her slightly uncomfortable. He took a closer look at the little princess with her low eyebrows and smooth eyes. Her ears were filled with red clouds. She looked shy and reserved, as if the owner of the unscrupulous and slightly fiery eyes before was not him. When was the last time she felt uncomfortable? I remember that it was a hidden figure who stabbed her when they first met, almost killing her and causing her to lose the mission. But looking at her sideways and vertically, she realized that the person in front of her was a scumbag with zero fighting ability. Why did she feel uncomfortable at that moment? For a moment, 14 couldn't figure it out. She said, "Let's go then." She didn't even look at him before she started walking. He came with her, perhaps because his head had not yet grown and only reached her shoulders, so his steps were naturally short. He hurried all the way and could barely keep up with her pace. When 14 realized that he had deliberately paused and waited, the young man who was chasing after him with his head buried in his head bumped into her. Taking advantage of 14's height and several days of private physical training, hiding didn't do anything to her, but knocked herself backwards. Her frail little body was about to fall to the sky. Before she could even scream, 14's quick-eyed hands quickly picked her up, and she lay on 14's body with lingering fear. She could only hear her own frightened heartbeat in her ears. It wasn't until his breath invaded a faint fragrance of herbs that the young boy finally realized that what he was holding tightly was the lapel of King Xian's clothes. Only then was King Xian pulling him, and Zizui pressed tightly against him. To outsiders, it looked more like he was throwing himself into Ziji's arms. The warmth on her face was rising and falling in an orderly manner at that time, and the warm voice, "You can let go," came from above her head. Although she couldn't hear any emotional ups and downs, Haidang could feel it. She must be angry. He just remembered what he had done. He quickly released his hands, and his face turned red instantly. He allowed King Xian to push him away gently, feeling embarrassed and frightened. If King Xian thought he was not dignified enough, if King Xian thought he was throwing himself into his arms on purpose, if there were too many ifs, his eyes became misty with worry as he thought about it. Would he be disgusted? You, after sighing. 14 looked at the little boy in front of her, who was no longer even taller than her shoulders. He buried his head lower and lower, and even tears could be seen falling to the ground one after another. She really couldn't understand that one moment she was an embarrassment as if she had been molested by her, and the next moment she was looking miserable as she was being bullied. She was clearly the one being bullied. But then I thought about it. This is a world where women are respected. How can there be any saying that men can eat women? Thinking of this, it became clear. Maybe she really violated the beauty? Thinking about the fact that this child has not even passed her 13th birthday. Although she is only a 16-year-old girl in the physical body, after all, she is living in an old man who has lived for hundreds of years. How can she continue to live and go back to care about a child who is still a boy in a world where women are respected? Thinking about it, she felt very angry for herself. Realizing this, 14 had to accommodate the other party a little more. After thinking about the loving gesture that an elder should have, he picked it up without any pressure, coaxed him a few words, and then took the child's hand to take care of Yojia all the way. Perhaps because of her friendly posture, 14 found that the way the little princess looked at her became more and more explicit. If she couldn't understand what the vague fierceness was before, at this moment, unless she was blind, she would not be able to see the bright affection in the child's eyes. She didn't believe that the cannon fodder of the original owner could encounter anything like love at first sight. She just thought that the child had an emotion derived from blind worship for her, just like a certain small world she had experienced before. The crazy pursuit of stars by boys and girls before the end of the world was not worthy of love. Otherwise, Sure wouldn't dare to think about it. If she were asked to learn the interactions between men and women in this novel. Thinking of this, 14 shook her head and put those messy erotic plots out of her mind. For the first time, she felt a little disgusted with her ability to remember things. Rough. It's so rough. 3 Hate to Marry Female Queen Sue 1003. When the motorcade arrived at Duke Mu's house, 14 was riding a horse all the way to see the old Duke leading everyone waiting at the door. This was beyond her expectation. According to her understanding of the plot, the old Duke was ill when her husband returned home. Looking closer, the old Duke's complexion is as usual. After thinking about it for a moment, I can probably guess that the reason why the old Duke fell ill in the original work was most likely because of her son-in-law's anger. It's understandable now, and I'm not surprised. After careful consideration, her decision to go on this trip was very wise. One day, the old Duke was on her side, but one day the heroine, the 11th princess, wanted to move her down, but it was a big obstacle. Unlike the original work, such a powerful backer was angered to death, and the 11th princess got the opportunity to form an alliance and marry with the Duke's palace for nothing. So, that naughty kid played himself to death. Haidang is the treasure of Duke Mu's palace and the most beloved great-grandson of the old Duke. It is for this reason that the queen arranged such a marriage for her. To put it bluntly, the queen intended to take advantage of her, but this naughty child tormented the ministers and the queen in disguise, which gave the heroine a good excuse to kill the king and became her good name. When entering the Duke's mansion, the ancients could not do without the human and sophistication. After greeting everyone of some status in the mansion and watching a few sideshows, Haitong's mother returned home from the court. She arrived late. After all, the old Duke was old and had been sleepy for a long time. When he saw the savior coming, he laughed and went to catch up on his sleep. So the responsibility of receiving the distinguished guests was transferred to the head of the family. Haidong's mother dismissed everyone and took 14 to play chess, thinking it was to make some room for Haidang to talk to her family. She only had 14. From morning to night, Haitong's family took turns to fight, from the oldest to the youngest, and they always had to find a time every day to torment her until she was drunk and drunk. The Duke of Mu stayed in the palace for 5 days, and then 14 took hiding back to the palace. By persisting for so many days, it was a great honor to the husband's family. For this reason, everyone in the old Duke's family loved this kind and good son-in-law of the Duke of Guo. He was smiling from ear to ear for several days in a row, his appetite increased greatly, and his complexion became better and better. Even Haitang's mother was extremely satisfied with her son-in-law and planned to give King Xian another son later. Naturally, she would not want it. The one with the brightest face is Xiao Haidang, Princess Xian. Everyone said that the 14th emperor's daughter, Prince Xian, was a playboy who was not doing her job properly and was also arrogant and unreasonable. However, she didn't expect him to find out after marrying her that his wife was not only gentle and handsome, but she was also very doting on him. Even though there were many beautiful brothers in the palace who were so attentive and eager to throw themselves into their arms, Prince Xian was still able to remain calm. He couldn't be happier. The princess was happy, and even the servants who served her were also happy, and they were rewarded from time to time, and everything was in harmony. The next day, after the shrine, Shirshir did not delay, and under the guise of several confusing cases, with the cooperation of her ministers, she requested an order to go south. Imperial approval. But she didn't expect that before leaving, the queen forced a bunch of people on her. This group of people, including several senior officials, a dozen guards, a family member, several servants, and even two